Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Zelda Fisser and today I'm going to talk to you about makeup brushes. I want to go through which ones I have, why I have them and what I use them for, so that you know what shapes and sizes to look for if you're on the market for a few new brushes. I'll be sure to tell you where all my brushes come from as I go through them, but for now I want to say that I think all of them except for one is cruelty free. And yes, they are dirty. I haven't cleaned them yet, but that's because I'm saving cleaning them for another video you'll be seeing soon enough. I want to make sure you can see I use them. You know, I'm not lying to you. I actually do use them often, and that's why they look the way they do. Now in total, I think I have about 20 brushes, and I keep them all in this little container. It used to be a mug. It looks like a camera lens, so it has all these little decorations on it. And I used to really love this lens. In matric, I took it to school because in my science teacher's class, we can make our own coffee. So I take my mug with me, go make coffee and then walk around with it. But it has a leak in it somewhere, so I can't drink from it anymore. And I decided it's the perfect size and it's the right amount of quirkiness for me to put my brushes in here. And since I don't have too many brushes, there definitely is still some space in here, so I can add a few more before I have to make a different plan for storing my brushes. Now I'm quickly going to categorize and organize our brushes so I can tell you about them in a specific organized manner. And then if you look at the bar down below, that shows you how much of the video you've watched. You'll be able to see like face or eyes and stuff like that, hopefully. Now I want to start with my eyeshadow brushes. I have 9 of them in total. This first one is a large fluffy blending brush from Kala. It is nice and soft and something I love using in my crease. This is the type of brush you go for diffusing the edges. Especially if you want to go big. This one blends pretty far and it applies in a pretty big region. So you're going to use this brush if you want something all over your crease and blend it out. Other than that, if I already have things blended out of my crease a little bit, I will just take this to make sure it goes that extra mile and that it's all nice and smooth. The other thing I would use this brush for is if I want something like really soft on my lid, I would take the color, blend it into my crease and then kind of just brush it on my lid as well. But it doesn't really show up much and that's kind of the point. It's to blend things out and create nice fades. A brush I didn't know I needed until I had it was another blending brush, believe it or not. It's a little bit more tapered than the previous one, where the previous one kind of belled out. This one's all tapered at the sides. Unfortunately, this one's not as soft as the previous one. It comes from BH Cosmetics, and most of my brushes come from BH Cosmetics because I bought a big eye set and a big face set from them. But this brush works really well for actually defining the crease, because I can blend something directly into the crease without blending it out too far. That way I can create a nice gradient and stuff like that without it actually hitting my eyebrow. So this is something I probably just go back and forth in my crease with. Sometimes I like squeeze it and go underneath my eye. And I can also use it to pick up color and kind of stamp it on the outer corner of my eye if I want something to kind of start blending onto my lid. That's something I'd usually do if I add definition at the end. I then have this tiny, slightly denser blending brush from Eco Tools. It doesn't flare out the same way the others do. And honestly, I haven't used this thing in at least the last year. Number one, it's short, so if I put it in my little cup for my brushes, it just disappears, so I never see it and I never reach for it. And also, it just doesn't do a good job at blending. I used to use it initially when I started doing my makeup because it's one of the first brushes I ever got. And I'd end up with this like thick line in my crease and I couldn't blend it out because this brush just didn't blend it out. And I'd be like, why does it always look so messy? And only once I actually got a proper blending brush did I see, oh, okay, so the tools you use do make a difference. So yeah, this is one I don't recommend you getting because it doesn't do much for me. On the topic of the tools you use though, I don't think expensive things are the answer to all your problems. Not that I use expensive things right now, but I do have 1 or 2 expensive palettes. And yeah, they're nice to have, but I have messed up just as much with my expensive products as I have with my cheap products. And I pulled off pretty damn great looks using my cheap products and not my expensive products. So I don't think it's the specific price of the product, but in the case of brushes, the shape and the density really makes a big difference because the shape determines how and if you can blend something out, and the thickness determines how much of the product you're applying at a time, and thus how dark it's going to come out. So with brushes, it's really about the shape and kind of if it's soft enough for you to want to put it on your face, you're probably not going to enjoy using it, but you can get soft and affordable brushes. So no, this video is not me trying to tell you have to get expensive things because BH Cosmetics is oh so expensive. I'm trying to tell you what type of shapes to watch out for so you can look for those brushes in cheap places or places you can afford. Anyways, back to the brushes. This is a brush that definitely changed my life when I got it. I used a very similar one before, but it wasn't cruelty free, so I looked everywhere and then finally I found that Carla sold one in this shape as well. It is flat yet fluffy, which is a thing I have said a lot in my videos. And what that means is if you look at the top of the brush, it's flat. Like it is a lot wider than it is tall. However, it is still fluffy. It's not packed densely the way a shading brush would be. And why I really like this is I can really use it to add dimension to my eyeshadow. I can pick up a dark color and I can apply it directly to the outer corner, and the color would come out darker than if I did this with a blending brush, and then I can kind of control where it's going. So I can put on the outer corner and I can choose, do I want to blend it out on the lash line? Do I want to blend it up into the crease? This is also great if you want to add definition to your crease, because usually I use my blending brush to apply one color in the crease, and I'll take a darker color with this and work it directly into the crease, because I get to apply it more precisely and blend it out without blending it out too far the way a blending brush would. Because since the brush is thin, I have a lot more control, but because it's fluffy, I still get to blend things out. And as a bonus, this brush I can use at the top and on the bottom of my lower lash line. This is the perfect brush to blend out your lower lash line. I reach for it all the time. Other blending brushes that are round is just gonna blend it too far. This really just gets into that small corner and it doesn't blend it too far. And for that reason, this is one of my favorite brushes and one of my go-to brushes. If I'm traveling, I'm always taking this with me. And it's because I can use this brush in a variety of different ways. I can even use it to pack on color on my lid. Then I kind of use the side of it and start packing it on. So this is very versatile and it helps me create a variety of looks. And thus, I will always recommend a flat yet fluffy brush. Next is a brush that's actually quite new to me. This is also from BH Cosmetics. And it's a very small blending brush with a slant in it. So it kind of has a little bit of a tip. So what I've been using this for is to add dimension, which is something I also say a lot. I love adding more depth to my makeup looks. So I would pick up a darker color, something like a brown or a black with the tip of this brush. Then I tap it right into the outer corner and then blend it out. And then the tip gives me a lot of control with exactly where I want to apply it. But as I'm moving the brush around, the rest of the brush that comes in contact with my eye really helps it blend in a very smooth way, because the product isn't being applied everywhere the brush actually touches, because the whole brush isn't full of the product. Did that make sense? I get to apply the product in one corner and then blend it out with the whole brush. And then the way I decide to orientate it, usually with the tip towards my lash line and the diagonal kind of lining up with my crease, I get to blend the color out up into my crease very slowly and with a very nice and smooth blend. And then I can also use this brush underneath my lash line. I just twist it so that the tip is facing me and the slant is facing away, and then I can blend the color out. But yeah, ultimately this brush just provides finer control, and the more detail the better, especially when it comes to blending, because then you can really work on a gradient and go from dark all the way to light, and it looks really nice. And once I was comfortable with the brushes I already had, I eventually discovered this one, and it just opened a whole new world for me. And that sounded very cheesy. On to the next brush. The next one I have is from ABH, which technically makes it one of the most expensive brushes I have, but it came in my Soft Glam palette. I also got one from my Modern Renaissance palette, but this is the only one I'm keeping in here. I don't want any duplicates in my brush holder. On the top part, it has a flat brush. It's not too dense, but it definitely doesn't count as fluffy. And at the bottom, it has a very thin looking blending brush, which is surprisingly rough for ABH. Like, it's not a nice and soft brush. I have yet to use this. I don't like the way it feels. Now this is another example of a brush that is just too short for me to use because I don't see it in the container I keep my brushes in. But I know it's there and I reach for it when I need to blend something out of my lower lash line and I need a clean brush to do that. It doesn't blend out as far as the previous flat yet fluffy brush I showed you, so I can use this to add some dimension, and I can also use it to pack on color. But it doesn't really stand out to me. It's a pretty normal shader brush, so I don't reach for this one often. Next is a flat shader brush from Claire's, and I don't know if Claire's is cruelty free, so I can't vouch for this brush, but it's really your classic flat eyeshadow shader brush. They taper a bit as they go towards the end, and what you use these brushes for is picking up the shadow and applying it directly onto the lid. You can also twist it and use it underneath your eye to apply color, as I mentioned with the previous one, but mostly you use this to get a high color payoff when applying a color. This brush, to be honest, I use mostly for concealer. Or I used to, it depends on the day. But I used to use this brush for a cut crease because it's nice and dense and it picks up the concealer well, and then I really can draw a line where I want it to be. So I did use this brush a lot for cut creases. Other than that, I didn't really use it much, and that is because of the next brush, which is also a flat shader brush, but this one, number one, is longer and I like holding a longer brush, and number two, it is thinner, both in the sense that it's flatter and it's a little less wide. So I feel like I have a little bit more control with this specific brush, and if I'm going between colors, this one's a lot easier to dust off because it doesn't pick up as much product in the first place. A flat shader brush is ultimately a standard. You do need something to apply the eyeshadow on your lid, and their shape doesn't really matter. They're usually dome shaped, but they're all going to do the exact same thing. So I wouldn't say there's too much of a science to picking your flat shader brush. Next, I have this very small pencil brush, which you can use to add some more detail. Now, it's something I use rarely because it's not often that I do a look where I need such fine details, but I would use it if I'm doing a cut crease to just kind of clean up that edge. I pick up the color I applied in my crease and follow right on the edge of the cut crease to make sure that line is smooth and straight. I would use it if I want specific definition on the lower lash line, especially towards the inner corner, or if I want to blend something out right against my eyeliner. But yeah, I really don't reach for this brush often. The next category is brows, and I really don't have much to show you here. First up, I have a spoolie, which is actually quite embarrassing. It's a NYX Micro Brow Pencil that I finished ages ago, but I've kept it all this time because I like the spoolie on it. I did have a spoolie brush, but I didn't know if it was cruelty-free or not, so I ended up getting rid of it. But what I do like about this one is the fact that it's uniform, like it's equally thick all the way through, so I just put it flat against my face and brush, even though I wouldn't say having a spoolie that's kind of Christmas tree shaped, that's thicker at the bottom than the top, does anything any different. They'll all brush your eyebrows out the same. Except I have to say I prefer these spoolies over those little small combs that you get. They don't make me as happy as these do. I feel these just work better. Then I have two brushes, which are technically eyeliner brushes, but I 100% use them for my eyebrows. I actually think everyone uses it for their eyebrows. The only reason I call it an eyeliner brush is because this one actually says eyeliner on it. But they are flat, dense brushes with short, slanted hairs. And this slant makes them great for filling in your eyebrows because it's kind of the angle you hold the brush to your face when you're using it. And it's nice and thin, so you can draw nice and neat lines and get your eyebrows looking the way you want them to. They also have flat heads, like the bristles end in a flat end, and you need that to be able to stamp the color onto your face, versus other brushes like flat shader brushes where you use the side of the brush to apply it. Here you use the front of the brush. So you're looking for that flat end. You don't want anything that tapers off. I prefer the BH Cosmetics one over the Claire's one purely because it's thinner. So we're past halfway and I have 8 brushes left that fall in the face category. The first one up is this dual fiber foundation brush. And I'll be honest and say I haven't used it in a very long time. I wouldn't say they're very necessary, especially not in this day and age where everyone has a beauty blender. A beauty blender just does the job so much better and they're a lot more fun to use. However, I did find this particularly useful when I was using a cream foundation. I had this stick foundation where you had to draw that foundation onto your face and then blend it out. And my beauty blender really didn't blend it out too well. Number one, I found it was really hard to actually get it to blend. It really didn't want to move much. And number two, making it move with the beauty blender kind of wore down the beauty blender really fast. So I found that the brush is a lot more durable and really spreads the product around. It worked really great with spreading the cream foundation. And you could make it smooth, but then it was nice to go in with the beauty blender and smooth out all the streaks. I found with cream foundation, it makes it really streaky and it picks up a lot of the foundation, which is kind of a waste at the end of the day. So I don't use this much with liquid foundation. I do keep this around for whenever I'm cream contouring or if I ever buy cream foundation again. But when this brush is clean and doesn't have foundation on it the way it does now, it works quite nice to apply your primer if you don't want to go in with your hands. I like going in with my hands, just rubbing the primer in all over. But I do understand not liking the use of your hands. I don't like using my hands in any other aspect of my makeup. And if you want to avoid that, you can just use this brush. You can either squeeze the primer onto this or dot it onto your face and then blend it out. Works fine. Just make sure it's soft. I've had one before this and it really wasn't soft. What you can do to make a brush soft is you can put some conditioner that you like put in your hair. You can put it through the brush and then you can hang it up upside down, let it sit like that overnight. Rinse it out the next morning and it will be a lot softer in the morning. The brush I did that with was synthetic. It was like plastic bristles and it took 2 or 3 times to get it soft and usable, but it did work. And depending on the exact material your brush is actually made out of, it could work a lot quicker. So if you have a brush that's being tough and like isn't that nice on your skin, try it out and it might end up being soft enough to use. Next up is this flat foundation brush. It really isn't one I use a lot, But what you would use this for is to apply the foundation to your face. Especially if it lying on the back of your hand, you can pick it up with a brush and then you can draw it on and then you can blend it out with a dual fiber brush or a beauty blender. What I've been using this one for is if I do use my stick foundation, it's pretty empty. So you kind of have to dig out what's left in there, and then I use this brush to kind of dig in there, put it on my face and then go from there. I can use it to pick up liquid foundation from my hand, put it on my face and then blend it out with a beauty blender. However, I like going in straight with a beauty blender and then working it onto my face. That way I don't use too much foundation. Where with this, you kind of put it on and only when you're blending out, you realize, oh, you have too much or too little. So I don't use this much, but it came with a face set and it's nice to have around. Next up is this large face brush. They said it's for powder, but I ended up using it for blush because I don't have a blush brush. And it is a large, fluffy, slightly domed shaped brush, which makes it perfect for blush. And I pretty much just stamp it in the product, apply it here on the apples of my cheeks and drag it back. Swoop it out like that, and then I can just buff it to blend out the product, and then nothing is too intense. The fact that it tapers a little bit and is very fluffy helps it blend it out really smoothly. You can use this to apply powder all over your face, but I have a better brush to do that with, so I ended up using this for blush. This could also be a great bronzing brush. I just don't use bronzer. I prefer just straight up contouring, and then I want a lot more control. But if you want bronzer blended out really well and blending into your skin, this would be a great brush to work it into your cheeks, onto your forehead, around your jaw, everywhere. Next, I have this fluffy slanted brush from Kala, and this is what I use for contouring. I would stamp the brush in the product and then angle it where I want to apply it. The tip of the brush would go where I want to apply the product, and the slant would be where I want it to blend. So if I apply contour, I want it to blend upwards, so the slant will be going upwards, and then I could blend it out here. And that's because where the tip touches, most of the color will be. And as I press the brush to my face, more of the bristles will start touching and it'll apply the color a little lighter than where I'm pushing with the tip. So that's what really helps get a blend going. When I'm using it on my temples, I twist the brush because I want it to blend backwards, so the slant is facing backwards. And then when I'm using it on my forehead, I twist it because I want it to blend downwards and then go like this. And then also just use it straight along my jaw. Definitely recommend a fluffy slanted brush for contouring. It's the easiest thing in my opinion, because it applies it where you want it and it does half of the blending for you. Next up, I have this stubby little dense brush. It is very wide and flat, a little bit tapered, and as I said, dense. And I use this for specific contouring. I use it right underneath my lip, and I use it here to contour my nose. I get to apply it exactly where I want it, and I get to blend it out a little bit, even drag it down the sides before going in with something bigger, which I'll show you in a second. But I found something like this is the perfect size for contouring. I used to use my flat yet fluffy blending brush for that as well. This one's just slightly thinner and a little bit smaller, so I have a little bit more control. Because it is dense, you can easily pick up a lot of product. So I usually tap it in the product and then give it one tap to dust it off a little bit before I go in. But I'd say it gives off a good amount of product. I don't have to go in too many times to get it dark enough, which is good. Next up, I have a flat shader brush, but bigger, and I use it on my face. And the only thing I use this brush for is to pick up a highlighting shade and apply it underneath my eyes. It really brightens up this area. It adds more coverage and it hides the lines you have here from the bags underneath your eyes. Honestly, if you think your bags are showing too much, just pick up a skin colored eyeshadow or something and stamp it onto that line with a brush like this and it will disappear. You can use a normal flat shader brush. It's just going to take longer because it's smaller and you're not going to cover as much surface area as you go. Also, by having a specific brush for this, I never have to worry about it having a different color on it because it's only going to have skin toned shades on it. So I just use it for setting underneath my eyes, and if I ever really want to, here between my brows to make sure it's not shiny. On to the second last brush, I have this little pencil brush. It's larger than the detail brush I had before, and it's this small little dome-shaped tapered brush. And I use this exclusively for highlighter. It is the perfect size for going down the bridge of my nose, making a dot on the tip of my nose, getting it right on my cupid's bow and nowhere else, and of course fitting in here right underneath my eyebrow. And last but not least, applying it right here in the inner corner of my eyes. It really gets into that little corner there, which makes it perfect. I of course like rubbing over my highlighter because I don't want it to be that blinding. I rather want it to blend into my skin. So I use this to apply it, and then I go over it with my finger to blend it out. And then on my cheeks, I don't have a separate highlighting brush for that. I would just pick it up with my finger and blend it on. Or I would just take this brush actually and make like small little circle motions and put the highlighter there. And again, the advantage of having this brush solely for applying highlighter is I never have to worry about it having any other color on it. So my highlighter always comes out looking fine. And then the last brush, which is probably my favorite one, is this Kabuki brush from the Body Shop. Now this is a very large dome-shaped brush, which is a little bit more dense than most. It is so soft, it is to die for, and it'll solve all your problems. If your blush is too dark, you just blend it out. If your contour's looking funny, you just blend it out. If your nose contour doesn't want to blend out, just go over it with this. It works great for applying setting powder. I usually like stamp it in the setting powder. Stamp it on first to kind of get all the product out, and then I buff it in. Same with powder foundation. I would just rub it in there and then rub it onto my face. And like I said, it blends out anything no matter how stubborn it is. So this brush genuinely makes me happy, and I do use it every time I do my makeup because I always have to set my makeup with setting powder or something, and then I need this brush. It obviously does not fit in my brush holder, so it stands right on top of my little makeup organizer on its own, where I can easily reach it because I reach for it a lot. Now, Kabuki brushes are more expensive, I'll admit to that, but they are a game changer. I really enjoy this brush and I would not replace it with anything. And then that is all 20 of my makeup brushes, what shape they are, what I use them for, and how I use them. I never thought there'd be a day where I own 20 makeup brushes, but I look forward to the day I get to say the same about owning 100 makeup brushes and seeing what other variety is out there in the world. But at the moment, I'm very happy with the brushes I have. There's no particular brush I feel I need right now. On the contrary, I actually have a number of brushes I don't need and I could survive without. So I'd say I pretty much cover the basics with this set. If you feel like you're missing something in your life, try one of these I mentioned. Of course, I mentioned one or two ones where I don't think you need them, just keep that in mind. They're fun to try if you want to branch out into something else. But please don't think you need piles and piles of makeup brushes. The only advantage to having a lot of brushes is that you don't have to wash them often, because if one is dirty, you can just grab for another one. But then you're just going to end up never washing your makeup brushes until you run out of it, and then you gotta wash 100 brushes in one go. So is that really better? Anyways, thank you so much for listening to me ramble about makeup brushes and what I think about them. I hope you found this video a little bit informative and enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Feel free to let me know down below what was the first makeup brush you ever got. My first one was one like this. It was just a little bit more circular, and it was like a black shorter brush, and I used it all over my face. I still have a video where I used it for the first time. It's very old. And you know, I loved that brush until I really had to move on to better things. But feel free to let me know what your favorite brush was, and while you were down there, feel free to hit that like button and that subscribe button. It's a 2-for-1 combo. And then I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye!